Happy Black History Month. That's right, you can say it back. Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
It's good to be alive today, and we have so much to be grateful for. I'm grateful to feel the fresh air in my lungs as I take a deep breath to steady myself. I'm grateful for the warmth of heat that returns to my fingers still so that I can hold on to this sacred desk where so many of our heroes have stood before me and will stand after me. I'm grateful that you are here, however that is so. I'd be remiss if I did not thank the Marsh Chapel worship team, JJ in particular, who already gave us some lovely sermon this morning. To all of today's liturgists, to the incredible women that I work alongside who are in the Association of Black Seminarians leadership team, Cynthia, Alexis, FBA, to our advisor, Reverend Charlene, thank you. Allow me for a moment to share this brief passage from Hebrews 11, verses 32 through 34, and then we're going to skip on down to the first part of verse 38. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and ruled foreign armies. The world was not worthy of them. For a few moments, I invite you to join me in meditating on the topic, worthy heroes. Worthy heroes. Let us pray. Lord, help me. Okay. Ask any child of a certain age what they want to be when they grow up. And somewhere in that ever-changing list of professions promulgated by the adults in their lives, next to doctor or lawyer or in between astronaut and scientist, will be a superhero. Whether you're Team Marvel or Team DC Comics, there's only one right answer there. Superheroes consume a part of our psyche and imagination. And it'd be easy to think that it's just children if we didn't have the statistics for the billions of dollars that superhero franchises earn at the box office each year. Alongside their ability to fly or shoot lasers from their eyes, their superhuman strength, their telepathy and telekinesis, superheroes inspire us to dream and wonder about being more than this fallible, fragile state that is the human condition. And how beautiful it is that now we see live and in living color a pantheon of heroes that is growing to represent the full spectrum of humanity. To have incredibly strong and smart and whole person depictions of Wonder Woman and Black Panther and Captain Marvel, among the X-Men and the Eternals, and a Captain America whose skin looks like mine. It changes for us on a fundamental level who and how we define heroes. There are indeed several definitions. Oxford English defines hero as a man or a woman of superhuman strength, courage, or ability. Merriam-Webster says a hero is a person who is admired for having great or brave acts or refined qualities. Dictionary.com says it's a person noted for courageous acts or nobility of character. If we look at the common threads of those definitions, it becomes clear that there are courageous, brave, and noble heroes all around us. In real life, our heroes do look like us, move like us, and reflect the best of who we are. Black History Month was started by Carter G. Woodson in 1926 as Negro History Week and was a direct intervention to the American consciousness to see and recognize the untold and undermined contributions of Black American heroes. So often, so many of our Black History Month observances take us from slavery to Dr. King Enlightenment Week and miss the mark on telling the multitude of stories available for us to tell. In truth, many of the stories are hard to hear. They are hard for us to sit with. It weighs on our spirits to think about the discriminatory treatment that generations of Black Americans endured and are still enduring in this country. To learn about lynchings and see fireworks is turned on school children and church folks with Bibles in their hands, I can't watch the Eyes on the Prize documentary anymore and see what happened to them in space. When we see these events depicted in Selma or in Netflix's When They See Us, it's enough to throw up our hands and say, Lord, have mercy. But if we stay there and sit with the reality that these people, these heroes, stood their ground and made incredible sacrifices for us to be in this space together today, it brings to mind something else that rattles the unwavering confidence I had in responding Superman to the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? In these stories, we learn that being a hero can get you in some serious trouble. Being a hero can get you torn up and tossed out. Being a hero can get you killed. As the text in Hebrews calls to our attention, the world was not worthy of them. The world in their day couldn't see past their skin color to embrace the contributions they made. And yet, as we look at the pieces of history we have recorded, we are living everything from the iron board to stoplights, to GPS, to the central heating harness that keeps us warm during the New England winters came from the minds and hands of a Black man. In spite of being told they weren't good enough, or strong enough, or smart enough, they offered these gifts anyway. If I had more time, I could pause here to talk about the current political co-option of critical race theory as a means to ignore and sanitize the telling the truth about the impact of race and class on American history. If I had just another minute, I would talk to you about the efforts underway to roll back hard-fought and hard-won voter protections in these United States. I would spend a minute or two on the enduring legacy of racism and white supremacy that brilliantly designed a self-perpetuating system that causes people who didn't create it to double down and defend it. I would talk about the ways in which we must more closely examine our classroom conversations, to not allow ourselves to get carried away in without seeing the real-life consequences of the academy, and poverty, and unemployment, and educational access, and healthcare, and more. But we don't have the time. So instead, I'll lean on the words of Nobel Prize-winning poet, playwright, and author Derek Walcott, who wrote, "Learn what I remember, that someday it might say it." Dr. Woodson knew that we must tell these stories, that we must tell the truth. Today we wonder how we honor the sacrifices of angels, the better men and women who have walked these halls, who marched in the streets outside, who fought and bled and sometimes died for us all to live. All of us, not just Black people or white people, but all of God's children walking this earth possess a piece of God's divinity in them that shines through in our good works. When we stand on the shoulders of these heroes, we can do all things. And for all the ones that we can name, there are so many we can't. There are so many whose stories are now whispered by aged voices or lost to the stars that twinkle in the velvet sky at night. Black History Month is a chance for us to tell these stories, and in doing so, we honor our heroes who inspire us to imagine better and greater. I'm fond of saying this time of year that Black history is American history. American history is world history, and the history of the world belongs to all of us. These stories, these heroes belong to all of us. We see in them ourselves, even and especially the disinherited, the disowned, the disrespected, the disregarded, the shut down and the sidelines. We see their strength, their perseverance. We see their drive to push through. And because they endured, we know that we can too. As the songwriter wrote, "I don't feel no breeze time." What a shift in perspective it can do. The Beatitudes that start the sermon on the Mount in Matthew remind us that God doesn't see us the way that the world sees us. The world thought that these heroes couldn't offer much in the way of material possessions and thus had no value. But God saw that they were rich with promise and possibility. The world mistook their meekness and commitment to nonviolence to be a lack of intelligence, but God saw them masterminding plans for their grandchildren to be set up for the win. The world persecuted them for their righteousness, but God rejoiced in their boldness to protect and defend what Dearly beloved, the question for us this Wednesday morning is not whether we are willing to suffer or even die for what we believe, for the stands that we must take, for the work that must be done. The question is, are we willing to live? Are we willing to dream and do the work? Are we willing to take up the mantle that we have inherited to become the worthy heroes that generations to come will remember? Perhaps not our names or our faces, but certainly our actions. Yes, my brothers, my sisters, my friends, my colleagues, the work of heroes is not done. Even though some of our heroes are now our ancestors, this too is an age, a moment in time, that calls for heroes to come forth. Will we be among them? In 1992, DC Comics released a special issue called The Death of Superman. It sold over 6 million copies, stunned the public, and became one of the highest-selling comics of all time. When asked about why they would do such a thing, why they would kill off a hero so beloved and ingrained in American and world culture, the writers said the world had begun to take Superman for granted. The world had started to believe that Superman would always be around to save the day. When Superman died, people really started to understand what Superman had meant to them. That he was more than a friend, more than an icon. He was more than a poster on our bedroom wall or an action figure in our toy chest. People knew that Superman stood for truth and for justice. The writers knew that they needed to bring Superman back, and it took 23 years for Superman to return to publication. Well, beloved, 2022 years ago, there was another hero walking the earth that people started to take for granted, that people had too many questions about his miracle working movements and the great crowds of witnesses that he was amassing at every turn. Superman may be dead, but I declare to you today that Jesus is yet alive. I said Jesus is alive. He lives in you and me. We are waiting to see when the writer of our story will send him back to us, but for now, in his place, stand we, stand us, stand the modern day prophets and witnesses and heroes. We may not be able to turn water into wine, to raise the dead, to feed a crowd of thousands with less than a handful of supplies. We may not be able to stop the storm from raging with a few words or with a wave of our hand. But the Jesus that lives in us calls and commands us to care for the poor, to aid the downtrodden, to stir each other up to good works, to love justice and do mercy, and to love each other with the love of God as neighbors and co-laborers in God's kingdom. Of the call and command, may we